From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
The debate over building the wall and boosting border security is back on after the midterms. As church groups gather in D.C. in protest, there are renewed threats of a government shutdown over funding.
And we spoke to a couple who alleges they were kicked out of their home because of their race. So how common is housing discrimination in Arizona?
Plus, California's wildfires have gotten so massive and powerful that they're generating their own weather. Coming up on Cronkite News.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Tanaya Williamson.
And I'm Andre Sims. Thank you for joining us.
In Washington, church groups joined today to protest building a southern border wall. Our reporter Daniel Pearl was on Capitol Hill.
Advocates swept Capitol Hill today as the budget fight looms to demand that money being spent on border enforcement agencies is spent back home in their communities. Abigail Orrin of Pittsburgh thinks resources being spent at the border could be used to better prevent tragedies like the October shooting that claimed 11 lives at a synagogue in her city.
Today I'm going to meet with my senators and representatives to talk to them about how I would like to see money that is currently being allocated to ICE and CBP redirected into our communities.
Orrin said she hoped the money could be used to help combat white supremacy at home and fund infrastructure like schools and parks. But for Tucson resident Vicky Gaubecca, immigration battles in Washington have real-world consequences. As someone who lives near the border, however, she says a wall won't help.
It's harmful to our communities. It actually creates deaths in our communities because it forces people to cross the more dangerous parts of our border. It causes flooding in the Rio Grande Valley. It caused flooding in Nogales.
Gaubecca said she hoped to convince Arizona Representatives Martha McSally and Kirsten Sinema to vote against President Trump's proposed border wall during the lame duck session. However their meetings go, the clock is ticking. There are 15 more days left in this legislative session, and President Trump has threatened to shut down the government if he does not get funding for the border wall. In Washington, Daniel Pearl, Cronkite News.
The protest was held just one day after GOP Senate leaders met with President Trump to discuss the wall.
Near their border, a migrant caravan of Central American people seeking asylum journeys to the U.S. through Mexico. As of today, the caravan is in the Mexican city of Tijuana. Frustrated people in Tijuana have been fighting with members of the caravan. More than 2,000 people have reached the border at San Diego by this point, but officials say only about 100 asylum seekers are being let in each day. The city of Tijuana has had issues with people complaining about overcrowding as more and more people seeking asylum come through.
The U.S. government awarded a contract to upgrade and repair a border wall near Yuma in compliance with President Trump's 2017 immigration executive order. Montana contractor Barnard Construction won the $324 million contract to complete the wall. According to a statement from U.S. Customs and Protection, construction of a 32-mile-long wall is expected to begin in April. The main portions of the wall will be near Yuma and Lukeville, Arizona, and existing fences in those areas will be upgraded.
President Donald Trump says he has answered written questions from special counsel Robert Mueller. Trump told reporters in the Oval Office today that he answered questions, quote, very easily. The president did not say when he would officially submit his answers to Mueller as part of the ongoing investigation into possible ties between Russia and the Trump campaign. Trump also presented his first set of Presidential Medals of Freedom today. Recipients included Miriam Adelson, the wife of a powerful Republican donor, and retiring Utah Senator Orrin Hatch. Posthumous honors were granted to Elvis Presley, Babe Ruth, and the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia.
The Arizona race for Secretary of State looks to be a narrow victory for Democrat Katie Hobbs over Republican Steve Gaynor. Gaynor appeared to be in the lead on election night, but the latest counts pushed Hobbs farther into the lead. Officials say there are about 90,000 ballots left to count, but the majority of those are in Maricopa County, which voted mostly Democrat in this election. If Hobbs is certified as the winner, she will be the first Democrat in 25 years to hold the office of Secretary of State. It's the second highest office in Arizona. In Georgia, the governor's race between Democrat Stacey Abrams and Republican Brian Kemp is also still close, and Abrams may be preparing for a legal challenge to Kemp's apparent lead. The Abrams campaign says it's preparing to file suit that over 18,000 Georgia voters were disenfranchised. If accepted, the case could lead to a recount. And the races for Florida's governor, Senate seat, and State Agricultural Commissioner are all close enough to require manual recounts. In addition, 2 counties turned in their machine recount information 2 minutes past deadline. That means last week's unofficial numbers will be used as the official totals instead.
Data obtained by 2 national housing federal agencies shows that housing discrimination complaints have gone up in the last 5 years.
Cronkite News reporter Alexis Avila sat down with one Valley family who alleges they've lost their beloved home because of discrimination.
The Brown family is still living in a shelter as they try to figure out what their next step is going to be. And they are not alone. Across the country, numbers are showing that race is the second most common reason for housing discrimination.
We are currently homeless. We reside in a shelter.
Eric Brown and his wife Constance Salas say the reason they're living in a Phoenix shelter with their children is because they were victims of housing discrimination.
When we got the keys, it was time to move in, we opened it up, the house was a mess. It was feces all over the house. It was urine. It's a heavy smell of urine.
Despite the initial challenges, the Browns say they fell in love with the Goodyear home. However, the neighbors next door quickly told them their landlord, along with another neighbor from down the street, were working together to get them out.
Because he felt like he could not sell his home because a black family lived on the corner of his street next door to him.
The Browns say the landlord tried different tactics to get them out of the house, like overcharging them for small repairs.
The fees were exorbitant. You know, like it was weeds in the yard. We got a $50 HOA fee. Friday charged us $200, and then he charged us $600. You know, for little mediocre things.
This is the house where the Browns used to live before finding themselves homeless. We have reached out to several neighbors to have them talk about the allegations of discrimination made against the Browns landlord. So far, they have declined our request for an interview.
We've seen people being told, like, you can't live, I can't sell my house because you're black, and we don't want black people in this neighborhood.
Numbers released by the National Low Income Housing Coalition show there's been an incline in fair housing complaints since 2013. In 2017, there was close to 29,000 housing discrimination complaints filed across the United States. The Browns were one of those families filing a complaint with the Arizona Fair Housing Center, a private organization that works to eliminate housing discrimination.
And the reason why this is happening to us is the reason why it probably happens to a lot of people in America is because of our race. This is a race issue, and you know, we've been discriminated against, and now we're homeless because of someone's decision that they made to use ethnocentrism, you know, against our family.
We have repeatedly tried to reach out to the Browns' ex-landlord for comment, but he has not answered any of our attempts. As for the Brown family, there has been no final resolution to the formal complaint they filed and are still struggling to find a new permanent home. In the Broadcast Center, Alexa Avila, Cronkite News.
We are heading into a holiday week.
Matt, will the weather stay cool throughout Thanksgiving?
Well, guys, to answer your question in short, yes, the temperatures we've seen throughout the week will remain with us throughout the weekend. No real cloud cover, no real precipitation chances throughout the weekend. We'll see some clouds next week. I'll tell you about that in a second. We're trying to see some Friday night football tonight. 66 degrees will be your temp at kickoff, 62 at halftime. Temps down into the upper 50s by the end of the game tonight. Good luck to those participants tonight. It's semifinal action across Arizona. Your temps tomorrow, 58 in Pace and 62 in Sedona, 53 in Flagstaff for a high brand extra sweatshirt if you're heading up there for a day trip tomorrow. You're in our active valley forecast. If you're waking up tomorrow, 49 degrees and clear skies early on in the morning. If you're hanging out and about, run some errands, 67 degrees around lunchtime, 12 o'clock. And if you're heading Out for the evening, 65 degrees and clear skies, temps dipping down into the upper 50s if you're spending your Saturday night out and about. And taking a look at the rest of your 7-day forecast, temps remaining in the mid-70s for highs heading into the middle of next week. But you can see some cloud cover on Tuesday. We'll dip the temperatures down a little bit. And your first 7-day forecast look at Thanksgiving, 71 degrees for your high. From the Cronkite Weather Center, I'm Matt Kling.
There are nearly 70 people confirmed dead and more than 600 missing as the California wildfires continue to burn. They are now the most devastating in U.S. history. As Cronkite News reporter Jordan Evans explains, meteorologists not only look at the weather patterns that drive the fires, but also the weather phenomena created by them.
Yes, tonight, in fact, blazes like the Camp Fire in Northern California get so big they can actually create their own weather. And today I caught up with an ASU professor who is an expert in atmospheric sciences to explain what kind of weather phenomenon can happen due to these fires.
There hasn't been moisture in California, so the ground conditions are very dry. So any kind of a spark, unfortunately, can generate a big storm that then gets whipped up by the Santa Ana winds.
And those Santa Ana winds can be described as an upper-level wind pattern caused by a dominant spinning area of high pressure. This clockwise circulation drives air over the mountains of California and into the valleys where it heats up and dries out, which can set the stages up for some pretty nasty fire conditions. That's exactly what we're seeing with the Camp Fire right now. And when these blazes do get too big, they can in fact create their own weather phenomenon.
Heat can produce changes in the way that the air spins and the winds that are spinning around a particular storm. So we know, for example, that in some situations, because of the intense heat that these fires are putting out, we can actually get what are called tornado vortices or firenadoes, where the winds are whipping the rising air and spinning it into a weak tornado-like formation. They're relatively small scale, but they can do the kind of damage that a weak tornado does with the added problem of being on fire.
And that's not the only issue these massive fires can cause. Brian Henry, who is a meteorologist at the National Interagency Fire Center in Boise, Idaho, says when wildfires produce strong winds, they can make it difficult for firefighting aircraft to fly. These really strong winds produced by the fire can create turbulence and hazardous flying conditions. Besides the strong winds produced by these blazes, temperatures are another thing that fire crews closely monitor, as they can act as another fuel source for these wildfires.
If you have a big plume of smoke over, you don't allow the heat of the earth to escape out into the atmosphere, and the conditions stay warmer. It's like a cloudy night is always warmer than a clear night. Consequently, under fire conditions, the nighttime temperatures stay high, and that can actually help keep the fire going when it otherwise wouldn't.
And now bringing things out to a bigger picture again, this is that upper level high pressure that I mentioned earlier. This is where it is currently sitting. And unfortunately, it's not going to go anywhere for the next couple of days. But as we head into next week, when we get into Thanksgiving, we will see that high pressure move off into the east. And we could see a trough move in, which could help bring some much needed rain for areas like California. And we could even tap into some of that here in the valley. So we'll be sure to track that for you here in your forecast as we head into next week. From the Broadcast Center, I'm Jordan Evans for Cronkite News.
Ahead on Cronkite News, a look at our top stories of the week.
We'll hear about Alzheimer's research in Arizona and a new documentary of the lives of teachers.
Plus, how a single basketball game is transforming dreams in the Navajo Nation. And a way to blow off some steam and have a little fun learning to throw axes.
On the next Arizona Horizon, it's the Journalists Roundtable. We will have the latest in the Secretary of State race and who will the governor appoint to succeed John Kyle in filling John McCain's U.S. Senate seat.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour. A botched heist leaves all the robbers dead, forcing their surviving widows to finish the job. Our fall film series continues Friday on the PBS NewsHour.
Join us each week on Catalyst, the show that explores new advancements, technologies, and innovations at Arizona State University that are shaping the future for tomorrow and beyond. Catalyst, Wednesdays at 9, right here on Arizona PBS.
This past weekend, the ASU women's basketball team made the 5-hour trip to Window Rock, Arizona for a matchup against number 4 Baylor. But for the team, this trip was about more than just a game. Reporter Anthony Totri has the story.
No expensive shoes, no perfect hoops, and sometimes no court at all. But that doesn't stop the passion for basketball for those in Window Rock, the Navajo Nation capital.
If there's a basketball and a hoop, you can basically just play anywhere.
This past weekend, that passion was showcased on national television as fans packed Window Rock High School's 6,500-seat gymnasium for the showdown on the Res, a game between Arizona State and Baylor's teams. For many, it marked the first time they experienced Division I basketball. Although the game's significance can't be understated, it was about more than just basketball.
Having them here inspires me to go bigger, dream bigger, and just have a mindset that wherever you live, you can always achieve more than you think.
It's almost like every other house has a basketball hoop out front here, and that's because basketball on the Res is different than it is back in Phoenix. For many, it means everything here.
Coming to this community, it's like, wow, there's a lot of kids that you're really going to impact, and having this opportunity is just amazing.
The team's goal was to leave a lasting reminder that anything is possible. And if there's one piece of advice Coach Charlie Turner Thorne has for those on the Res, it's to follow the path that came before them.
They had a fire inside of them. They were hungry to do things that, they weren't sure they could do. I would tell them, it's okay if you don't think you can do it, but go for it.
With 5,600 in attendance and thousands of kids in the stands, the Sun Devils left those on the reservation with an experience unlike any other. In Window Rock, Anthony Totri, Cronkite News.
Thank you.
The Sun Devils were unable to beat the Bears, but Coach Turner Thorne believes what the team set out to do beyond the game was accomplished.
As the number of people diagnosed with Alzheimer's increases, there's concern over the lack of progress in research into prevention and treatment. Reporter Jimmy Jackson spoke with Arizona leaders in this research area to see what impact a lack of funding is having.
In recent years, Alzheimer's research funding from the federal government has increased to an all-time high, more than doubling between 2015 and 2018. But to prevent a disease that still has no survivors, it still may not be enough. According to James Fitzpatrick, the Director of Programs and Advocacy at the Alzheimer's Association, Alzheimer's disease is the least funded chronic disease in the United States. He says that lobbying Congress to continue to increase funding is critical.
Cancers and HIV and these other diseases in the top 5 in our country are still receiving way more than what we are, and it's not enough.
The National Institutes of Health is the federal research agency that allocates funding for diseases, and Alzheimer's now receives an estimated $1.9 billion, which is an increase of $1.2 billion over the last 4 years. Paul Coleman, a research professor at Arizona State's Biodesign Institute, says another issue is that the fight for grant money is very competitive.
In the recent past, the money has run out only when they get through the top 5 to 7% of the proposals. That means then that the other 93 to 95% of the work that people have proposed never gets funded, doesn't get done. So certainly this has been an impediment to progress.
Most research in recent years has focused on plaques and tangles, which are proteins that build inside and in between neurons in the brain in areas that affect memory. However, Coleman says this research is limited because it does not reveal enough about the causes of Alzheimer's that may begin earlier in the brain's development.
It's my opinion that the devotion of a number of people to looking at plaques and tangles has interfered with real progress in understanding what's going on with Alzheimer's disease.
Eric Ryman, the executive director of the Banner Alzheimer's Institute, says that he would like to see funding reach $3 billion. And with that, researchers will be able to continue current research while also exploring other areas.
We have the opportunity to take the more traditional findings, put them to the test in more powerful ways, and find out one way or the other, are they on the right track or should we pursue other mechanisms? At the very same time, we need to be thinking about novel mechanisms and risk factors, new targets at which to aim treatments.
Ryman says that Arizona has an advantage because it is a major research hub for Alzheimer's. In Phoenix, Jimmy Jackson, Cronkite News.
In 3 decades, Alzheimer's is expected to cost $288 billion to the U.S., according to the Alzheimer's Association. If there's not significant progress on treatments or a cure, experts say the cost could bankrupt the country's healthcare system.
Teaching in Arizona is not just what people do for a living, it is also the name of a new documentary. Reporter Tanaya Williamson has the full story.
Arizona teachers received the attention of millions this year as they marched during the Red for Ed movement. The documentary Teaching in Arizona covered that, plus a little more about the profession and what it means in our state.
We chose to create this documentary in order to really show people what it's like to be a teacher today and to dispel the myths that teaching is a part-time job and that it in fact is a profession that requires a lot of preparation, professional development, mentoring, and training to be highly effective.
Those of us who are not teachers, hopefully what this documentary will share is to kind of be a wake-up call, to help each and every one of us to say, you know what, we need to do more to help our teachers.
So that is 24/7. I'm just a teacher all the time. There are times that I just have nothing left in me. I just kind of I can't give anymore. There's no more I can give.
I've been teaching for 12 years, so it's been amazing. I love teaching. It is really, really hard, but it's been amazing.
Teachers like Nathaniel Rios were featured in the film and opened up about the financial difficulties that he and his wife face.
I have a second job. I teach during the day, and then this Saturday I'll work to 9, 10 o'clock in an ice cream shop, and next Friday I'll work to 11:30, probably 12, and close the ice cream shop down.
Rios says that although salary is a factor, that there is much more to be addressed.
There's more conversation to be had that is complex, and teachers would like to have a seat at the table because we feel like we, being on the front lines, know what that looks like.
In Tempe, Tanaya Williamson, Cronkite News.
Teaching in Arizona is being screened across the valley. The next screening will take place on November 29th.
Veterans Day was this weekend, and so was an annual gathering aimed at helping vets who struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder. Amani Stevens in our Washington bureau has the story of the 31st annual Operation Freedom Bird.
Going to war meant life or death, and healing from those traumatic experiences took some time, particularly for those with PTSD. For some, the journey toward healing went from Arizona to here, this Veterans Day.
William Quill.
The nonprofit organization Operation Freedom Bird is helping veterans take their steps toward comfort.
They're able to then move forward in their lives, which in some cases stopped when they returned.
I never thought about that until I got here and I seen the names, and then now I can see the kids' faces.
For over 30 years, groups of veterans have made this journey to the nation's capital. And for most, the memories are still raw.
There was a feeling of death every place and everything you did over there.
It's the start of the healing process, and a reason why Vietnam War veteran Rick LaFawn says he never understood what healing meant until now.
It was like literally stepping back into time. Going back into a place that you're always trying to bury.
And years later, LaFawn had a special moment. He reunited with veterans from Korea, who also served in Vietnam. But the number of people that serve in any war is getting smaller.
There's very few people in this life that really understands the horror, the disgust, the fear, the living condition.
The VA estimates that about 30 out of every 100 of Vietnam War veterans have suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder.
It's the community that actually has to help with PTSD. It can't be just an individual thing.
And 50 years later, LaFawn says it wasn't good to hold on to the pain this long.
Survival isn't just coming back with all your body. It's the baggage that you bring back with you.
In Washington, Imani Stevens, Cronkite News.
Our Cronkite News reporter Sammy Giebers had to put on quite a few extra warm layers for this next story. She followed researchers into a freezer to learn more about what local groups are doing to sustainably store food in sub-zero temperatures.
So you have to put the jackets and the hats and gloves and everything.
Any guesses as to what these researchers are gearing up for?
I enjoy doing the studies for my lab as opposed to in the freezer itself.
Here's a hint.
And it's telling us that right now we're
running at a chilly -18, which is exactly where we want to be.
It's -18 degrees in this ice cream freezer. Researchers and developers are coming up with a more sustainable way to keep all of your frozen treats cold.
This is my kids' favorite project that I do because I'm keeping their ice cream cold.
ASU researchers Bash's, SRP, and Viking Cold Solutions have come up and installed those guys. Way up there, they're face change material. They act like ice packs, like the one you might put in your lunchbox.
And the idea is that it's going to store the cold stuff that we need, and then it's going to release that cold slowly when it's getting hotter outside and when energy is getting more expensive.
It takes a lot of energy to keep Bash's ice cream freezer cold, especially during a summer in Chandler.
Annually, they use about as much power as 1,000 of our homes.
And these thermal energy storage systems allows Bash's to turn off their air conditioners during peak hours.
It's important for us to be thinking about the future, thinking about innovative ways to conserve energy, thinking about sustainability.
Okay. Here we go.
And Kristen Parrish hopes that this sustainability project will expand to other parts of the valley and other freezers. In Chandler, a very cold Sammy Giebers for Cronkite News.
SRP said these warehouses take up a significant amount of power, especially in summer months. Projects like this can help reduce energy and fossil fuel use.
If that long holiday weekend wasn't long enough, or you just need to get some pent-up aggression out after the election, you may want to head to Tempe. Reporter James Barnett shows us a new spot that lets patrons throw axes just for fun.
If you think you've tried everything in the valley, Lumberjacks in Tempe is offering something a little different.
I mean, what's selling? We're throwing axes. It's just about having fun here. You throw an axe, you kill it.
And as for safety,
easy now, they do bounce.
Their record's clean so far.
Absolutely no injuries. We have really strict safety protocols to make sure that all customers are absolutely safe here.
It's a different experience. It's super, super different. You get to drink, you get to eat, like there's no restrictions. I didn't do well at all. During the game, I only got one. But like during practice, I did really well. Like I got like a couple.
Not everyone gets it on their first try.
It was almost stuck. You were right there.
But with some coaching,
Bring it all the way back first, take a step, and release.
practice makes perfect. Whether you want to relieve some stress or let out your inner Viking, throwing an axe at a giant wooden target is sure to do the job. In Tempe, James Barnett, Cronkite News.